Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Semoga semua sentiasa sihat. I wish you doing good today. So, today I would like to continue my chapter. So we're gonna explain another two chapter, which is the chapter 7, international organization, and then chapter 8, international law, and then we will touch on diplomacy as well as foreign policy. So let's not gonna waste any time. So let's start with chapter 7 first. Okay, so this is chapter 7. Okay, regardless on international organization. So the currently topic outline for this chapter will be we're gonna define what is international organization is all about. Then we're gonna touch on nature and type of international organization. We're gonna look at features of IOs. We're also gonna touch on classifications of international organization, and then we'll look at the developments of IOs in terms of historical. Okay, so what is international organization? So it is an organization with an international membership which scope or presents. So in international relations, so when we look back at chapter 4, which is actor in international relation, so in IR they have stated two actor. First, which is the state actor, which is state is the main actor of international relation, and then a second will be the non-state actor. So inside the non-state actor, it also include international organization, which is one of the prominent actor in international relation, other than state actor. Modern world international politics. Most of the state currently are focusing towards IO, rather than use their own self, for example, going silo in the international system. So okay, so state and non-state actor depending on type of organization, and then they are in a period of transition. Their role in world politics and the scope of their activities has greatly increased. So, what purpose do international organizations serve? First, connecting member. There is a also can use as a bridging a gaps. So inclusive, become more inclusive. For example, when United Nations were formed in 1945, so it actually create a unity towards other members, right? In international politics, international system, and also it also encouraging peace and security. And some sort use international organization to develop their economy. For example, ASEAN, okay, and EU, European Union, APEC, and etc. Okay, what is international organization? So international organization is an organization with an international membership. Who are the member? So again, state and non-state actor depending on the type of organization. And then what is the purpose do the international organization serve? It connecting members, bridging gap, encourage peace and security, as well as the economic development. Okay, so the first type of IO, which is the intergovernmental organization. So IGO, we call it IGO. So in IO, they have IGO, they have NGO, non-governmental organization, and then they have MNCs, okay, multinational corporations, or or companies with a franchisee, towards internationally. Okay, and then some sort also put international terrorism as an international organization. So, okay, So the term of first we look at the term of intergovernmental organization (IGO). So IGO refer to an entity created by treaty involving two or more nations to work in a good faith on issues of common interest. In the absence of the treaty, an IGO does not exist in the legal sense. So main purpose of IGO to create a mechanism for world inhabit. So types of IGO will be they have four main criteria. Okay, worldwide or globalization. Global organization generally open to nation worldwide as long as certain criteria were met. UN and its specialized agency, the Universal Postal Union, Interpol, WTO, IMF, so all is categorized as a worldwide global organization. Secondly, it's a regional organization, so open to member from a particular region. Okay, for example, European Union focusing on Europe, African Union focusing on African, Organization of American State focusing on the American state only, and then we have ASEAN, focusing on Southeast Asia. And the third, focusing on culture, linguistic, ethnic, religious, and historical. For example, historical link. For example, Commonwealth of Nation and OIC. OIC focusing on the Islamic State, Commonwealth Nation, focusing on the Commonwealth State. Okay, and the last would be the economic organization. So based on economic organization. So for example, WTO, World Trade Organization, we have Intermonetary Fund, IMF, we have OPEC, Organizations of Petroleum Exporting Country. So these are the international cartels that focusing on economic organization. So only members that produce petroleum only can become a member of OPEC. Okay. So this is generally the this generally the open to nations worldwide. The what the type of criteria of IGOs. Okay, so UN is an especially agencies of Universal Postal Union, same lah. Okay, cultural, economical. Okay, features of IOs. Okay, features of IO. IO is a long range purpose. So mainly focus on security, stability, or lasting. So it is an equal participation and also it has a responsibility. For example, when you become member of ASEAN or UN, so you have responsibility lah towards the international organization. It is an institutional framework. So, for example, they have structure, has purpose, it has vision, view, and mission of the organization, and it also can consider as multilateral international treaty. So, for example, we have Treaty of San Francisco, UN. So we have ASEAN Bangkok Declarations, and it also provides charters and it also includes diplomatic missions. Okay, so classification of IO, the first would be the geographical consideration. So we have Intercontinental Organization, which is the UN. So UN is a universal organization. And we have Federation of Organization, which is International Red Cross, IRC. Okay, and then we have regional organization, which is EU, ASEAN, and OAU. This is geographical consideration. So according to two character, the first will be the degree of competence. Is it the organization is general or limited? Or it is loosely integrated or highly integrated? For instance, European Union give up national security and national sovereignty. So if you want to be part of EU, you have to lose up your national sovereignty. Okay, so ASEAN is loose about not about to give up. Okay, so for example, if you become member of ASEAN, so the organization is loose. Why? Because of they don't have any treaty bounded. Okay, so just like AU, or OAS, and as well are like same as ASEAN. Okay. The historical development of IO. So so the first ideas came to build IO is from the Woodrow Wilson 14 point, when Woodrow Wilson says that we need to end the war. We cannot work as a silo in the international system. So he actually, after the World War One finished, then he initiate what we call as League of Nations. Okay, so League of Nations. So perhaps that the idea of League of Nations can actually loosen down the state of that involved in war, so they can came over and discuss about the to get a good resolution. But yet things happen. World War Two begin. World War Two begin. Okay, and then League of Nations collapse. So League of Nations collapse, and then start over as a United Nation. Okay, and then the United Nation bill uh, initiate United Nation as a uh, continuous from the League of Nations. Okay, and the okay, so you can just read it. The same things that I mentioned just now. And then until now, from 1945 until now, so United Nations will be the international body that portray the international system, that try to make the international system look more peaceful and then reduce the conflict, okay, between the state. Okay, so the perspective of international organization came from the the theory of liberalism, because the idea of liberalism is more on terms of collective action. It is far different between the realism. Okay, so realism focusing on anarchy, hegemony, state-centric, which means that realism don't trust organization at all. For example, because they feel that only state actor is a prominent actor. No, state actor is not a prominent actor. And then when in international system, they don't have any law that can bound it. Although United Nations had revealed some law regardless on the do and don'ts in international system, but yet the realism perspective, they don't take that as a legitimate law, because only a legitimate law can be done by the state, not the third party. So they feel that international organization is a third party. Okay. So okay, in terms of functional theory, so Hans says that it is a gradual approach to the world order, expanding non-political matters and also interdependency theory. So functionalist theory focusing on the dependency theory. For example, the dependent on the first world, second world towards third world. So it is needed to them. For example, the third world depend on the new end product, depends on the security in terms of the first world, and then the first world depend on the third world in terms of resources, in terms of people. So it is a interdependency perspective. So that's why when organization happen, it could actually make it clear the 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 collaborations between the state can be more clear. Okay, system theory. Okay, theory system. So it's a set of interrelated entities and in relationship. This is by the David Easton. Okay, international regime. Okay, Stephen Kreiser says that it is proportions of process of global interaction. So when we look at uh, what actually had been brought out by the international organization, so Stephen Kessner says that it is obviously, for example, it is a power centric, uh, and also people, state who involved in organization, they have their own interests as well as values. It is vice versa in terms of behavior. So you can look at the outcome itself, and for example, the every organization, they have their own purpose, and then the state choose to become a member because of a lot of purpose. Mainly, for example, NATO. If you join NATO, you are being bound with you can have a good in terms of power, in terms of security itself, also like that. So any international organization, they have their own interests. Okay, so Bernard says that it is global governance, so it's a sphere of political or socialization. So a good effort in terms of international nation that can actually govern, the relationship between other state. And then David Held says that it is a world government, and for example, European Union. Okay, because when you join EU, so you have to put down every nationalism factor, and then you have to unite to build and also to make EU become more great. Okay, worldwide or global organization, international. We look at UN a bit. United Nations. So what is United Nations? So United Nations is an organization founded on 1945 after the Second World War. So the main purpose of UN is to maintain worldwide peace, facilitate international security, international law, and social equal. So the UN structure is the Security Council, which consists of the following countries: Russia, USA, Republic of China, France, and the United Kingdom. Okay, United Kingdom. So what is UN? So it is an international organization designed to make the enforcement of international law, security, human rights, economic, and social progress easier for country around the world. So right now, UN has 192 members country, and then the headquarters were in New York City. Okay, current structure of UN. So the main body will be the Security Council. So in the Security Council, they have members, which is a prominent member, or we call it as a veto power. So uh, a lot of issues, conflict that being discussed were being held in the Security Council, regardless on the security matters or conflict matters. Okay, and then they also had a secretariat, and then another department which be an economic and social council, were the examine economic and the social council. They are responsible to terms of human right, child education, culture diversity. More on medical pandemics. So they were focusing on that. Okay, but Security Council mainly focusing on the war, security, tension, territorial dispute, other factors um, that will lead to the war if we cannot resolve it. Okay, and then another one we have a separate body which is the International Court of Justice, who actually try to rebuild the international law lah. So okay, so the Secretariat menjalankan tugas lah. So for the security. for the UN itself. Okay, so UN has main 6 organ. Okay, General Assembly, Security Council, ECOSOC, trustee, who actually the trustee of the UN, ICJ, and also the Secretariat. Okay, 5 important point. Okay, for principle of UN Charter. The first, so every organization has their own charter. For example, the UN has their own charter, as well as ASEAN also had their own charter. So chartered is a principle lah for the organization itself. Okay, they wanted uh, to more focusing more make it more transparency. Okay, towards the all the member of the organization itself. Okay, the 5 important points. So first, state are equal in international law. So state have fully sovereignty. So all state have fully sovereignty over their own affairs. And third, a collective responsibility from others also. And then non-interference in internal affairs. So they cannot interfere any internal affairs because all states have their own sovereignty. And then equality of right, men and women. Okay, General Assembly. So we have 192 state member. Plenary session in GM, in General Assembly, they have 192 state member. So they have plenary session. So state leader will address the assemblies, translate in the widest language. There are also special session and also emergency session. It's a provide powerful medium for state to put forward their ideas and also argument. So power to determine control finance UN program include peacekeeping operation. So election members of UN agency coordinate UN program through ECOSOC, economy and also social. And it also has community lah of the General Assembly. Okay, this is the HC Dr. Ali Abdul Salam. So were elected president of the 64 session of United Nations GA, General Assembly, on 9 June 2009. So president of GA Assembly elected yearly basis. Okay, Security Council. So responsible in maintaining international peace. So the council has power to define an existing nature of the security threat, to structure of to the responsible to such threat, and to enforce its decision through mandatory directive to the UN member. So it consists of 5 permanent members, as I said before. So dikira macam permanent member ni veto power lah. Okay, veto power. US, Britain, France, Russia, and China, and then non-permanent member. So it is changing yearly by basis. So Malaysia also pernah jadi non-permanent member in the United Nations. Okay. So this is Security Council. Okay. So president elected every 6 months among the 15 members. So after elected, the president of US once session of Security Council introduced the resolution accepted by 15 members reducing nuclear weapon. This one were time Obama time. Okay, second, the Economic and Social Council. So mainly focusing on promote welfare of all people and meeting 2 times yearly. The meeting held in New York and also Geneva. 54 members elected every 3 years. Non-state can renew membership continuously, except permanent member of the council. Okay, 3rd quarter of UN budget is spent in ECOSOC. Okay, 3 main function. The first would be the deliberations and also recommendation. So human right, refugee, social development, culture, health, semua ni lah. And then second, research report, and the last will be the coordination. Okay, this is the ambassador for the ECOSOC. Okay, the Serbian Lucas was elected 65th president of the Economic and Social Council, 2009. So Ambassador Lucas is the permanent representative of Luxembourg to the United Nations. She present her coordinator to the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon on 25 August 2008. Okay, the next will be the trustnership. Is focusing trustnership ni dia banyak look at the affairs of the country that are still not being able to be independent. So UN will recommend to the mother country whether able to be independent or not. Now the role of trusteeship has been declined. Okay, the Secretariat, body of international civil servant, headed by the Secretary General. So currently, Antonio Guterres as the Secretary General, appointed by the General Assembly to third vote upon recommendation of the Security Council. So 5 years term since 1st January 2007. So constitute full-time employment on the organization, preserve neutrality, as stated in Article 100 of the United Nations Charter. Okay, the last will be the ICJ. So the ICJ was uh, held in Netherlands at the Hague. So it composed of 15 judges elected by the GA and also the council. So serve 9 years term. Ini adalah ICJ lah. ICJ ni. So any others conflict or the tension between the state brought out, if cannot settle, they have to brought out to ICJ to get the result. Okay, so the next will be the peacekeeping mission. UN peacekeeping mission is very important. So until now, a lot of peacekeeping operations has been held, took place in African, Middle East, Latin America. So for example, for example, Kashmir until now still has peacekeeping mission from since 1949. Sudan, Sierra Leone, Cyprus, and also peacekeeping in law. When peacekeeping happened, they involve a lot of money. Okay, so this is trend. IO is important in a changing world politics. So further increase accommodation and cooperation between IO and the state. It also can prevent war and also maintain peace and security. Interdependence and globalized IO become more important and complex. So cosmopolitanism, citizen become of the world become more engaged, with the globalist world. So global governance become more relevant. A lot of global issues that have to settle in terms of by using the organization. So a lot of state also now use regional integration as their main agenda, as well as Malaysia, and also restructuring of the UN. A lot of issues happen in United Nations. Recently, because of a lot of things happen. So some scholars says that United Nations need to restructuring. I personally said also they need to restructuring to become more efficient towards the competitive environment nowadays. Okay, so that's all for IO. So let's move to the uh, on chapter 8, which is the international law and diplomacy. And then we're gonna touch on the foreign policy a bit. Okay. So let's start international law and policy. So introduction, there is common assumption that international law matters little to the international politics. So the power and also the interest of the state are what matters. So if international law doesn't matter, so why do state and other state actors devoted so much effort to negotiating new legal regime and argument to the existing one? Okay. So why there's so much international debate revolve around illegal use of state behavior? So around the applicability of legal rules and around the legal obligation incumbent of the state. So why is compliance with the international law so high even by domestic standard? Okay, so a lot of issues happen between the international law, you know. So what is the meaning of international law? So international law is defined as a body of rule and principle which are binding upon state in relation with each other in recent years international with each other. So in recent years, international law expand to include a number of new players, for example international organization, individuals to a lesser extent, and NGOs are also subjected of international law. Okay, so this is a modern approach. So is it international law basically is a body of law that regulate the activity of entity possessing international possibility. So it is also the traditional approach. So the conduct of relation of the relationship of the state. So basically, international law ni used to settlement lah. A lot of issues happen between state to state or state to other state if they cannot have a mutual understanding or they cannot have a mutual mutual resolution. So they have to brought to international law that settle and also to reduce tension lah, to get the solution by the international law. Okay, so this is one of the definitions also. So the definitions of international law center on the word inter, which means between, as opposed to intra, which means within. So literally, international law is defined as law between nation, state, between state lah. So which stem from arguments embodied in a treaty or custom that is recognized by all nations. Okay, basically, they have two international law. First is public international law. Second will be the private international law. Okay, so concern only within question for rights between several nations or nation that the citizens or subject to of other nation. So that is public international law. So private international law deals with controversies between private person, natural or juridical, arising out of situation having significant relationship to more than one nation. So in recent year, the line between public and private international law have become increasing uncertain. So issues of private international law may also implicate issues of public international law. And many matters of private international law have substantial significance of the international community of nations. Ni sama lah, what is international sama. Okay, so the meaning means that private international law deals with those cases between particular legal system in which foreign element attribute rising question as to the applications of law, foreign law, or the role of foreign country. For example, if two Englishmen make a contract in France, then sell goods statute in Paris, an English court would apply French law as regards to the validity of the contract. Okay, so public law, it covers relationship between state in all their myriad forms, from war to satellites, and regulates the operations of the many international institutions. It may be used universal or general. Okay, for example, the practice of diplomatic asylum that has developed to its greatest extent in Latin America. Okay, political asylum means a political person that get alibi or get permission to stay in other state that the other state will take care of him. So that is what we call the diplomatic asylum lah ataupun political asylum. Suaka politik dia panggil kalau bahasa Melayu tu They call it Suhaka politik. So it is for political person lah. So development of international law, a lot of development has been made. Started from the Treaty of Westphalia, and then grow the outcome become more bigger. So a lot of treaty had occurred until the declarations uh, of granting independence to colonial countries and people 1960, so a lot of treaty have been made. For example, in UN also we have UN chartered the charter of the UN, so define structure of UN, the world only supernatural organization. Okay. So nature of international law consists of rule and principle which govern the relationship and dealing of nations with each other. So international law also create principle for governing international relation that compete with the core realist perspective principle of sovereign and also anarchy. Okay, so this is the nature of international law. So in the past, international law was commonly described as the law that regulates the relationship between state amongst each other, or the system of legal norms regulating mutual relation between state, or the state of rule recognized by state and concerning their external relation, or the set of rules binding within the international community. Unlike international law that derive from actions of a legislative branch or other central authority, so IL derives from traditional agreement signed by a state. It also differ in the difficulty of enforcement, which depends not on power and authority, also for to central government, but no reciprocity, collective action, and international norms. But on, okay. So people are often confused between institute and organization. So international institute are commonly defined as complex of norm, rules, and practice that prescribe behavior rules, constrain activity, and shape expectation. Therefore, international law are institution. So IO, like United Nations, are physically entities with staff and age office. IO cannot exist without institution framework, as their very existence purposes a prior set of norms, rules, and principles that empower them to act and which they are charged to hold upon. Okay, so they have three level of institution. So state already create. Pertama dia panggil constitutional institution. Okay, so it's a principle of soft regionality which define the terms of legitimate statehood. Okay, macam macam kita punya constitution lah. So state ada, setiap negara dia ada perlembagaan dia sendiri. Yang kedua adalah fundamental institution. So international law and multilateralism, which provide the basic rules to, for example, shape how states solve operation and also coordinate problem. Okay, the third adalah state develop issues, specific institution. So such NPT, nuclear non-proliferation treaty (NPT), which enacts fundamental institution practice in relying on interstate relationship. Ni antara treaty lah. So state develop itself on a specific matter. Okay, this is international law is a practice on a daily basis of foreign office, national court, or other governmental organ of state. So the evidence is that reference and international law has been a normal part of the process of decision making. State do not claim that they are above the law, or international law does not bind them. So that's why, because international law ni, most of state feel that there is third party, so they cannot bind the state. State cannot also claim they are above the law, but some state obviously claim that they are above the international law. For example, North Korea, US itself. Okay. So this is source of international law. How actually international law resolve their problem. The first will be the treaty, under the Article 38 of the International Court of Justice. So it says treaty, custom, general principle of law, judicial decision. The last which is the writing of the juries. Okay. So treaties were custom lah. Principle of law are sometimes referred to the primary source. Okay, treaty ni perjanjian, custom ni macam ada adat lah, macam tu. They found it, for example, got custom law that can bound, okay, can bring back to make decision. Okay, and then judicial decision, keputusan hakim, and the teaching of public are sometimes referred to as a subsidiary or second the resource or evidence of international rules. Okay, this is treaty. So treaty are other written conventional are important of source of law. So major instrument of cooperation and change in IR, international law. So when signed and ratified the treaty, it must be observed. Okay. So UN Charter is one of the world's most important treaty. Okay, custom, when the stated behave towards each other in a certain way of long enough, so their behavior may become generally accepted practice with the statute of law. So listed in the statute of International Court of Justice in the International Custom has evidence of general practice accepted as law. So custom juga boleh diterima pakailah sebagai undang-undang. So where to look for evidence of customary law? So founded in actual practice of the state. Okay. Rough idea of the state practice can be gathered from published material, newspaper about the action of the state, statement made by the government and others. So this is custom as a source of law. So custom play a less important role in modern society. However, custom can be a forceful that unwritten rule is thereby created. So to qualify as a legal rule, a custom must meet the following requirement. So dia kena ada 4 perkara ni lah. So it can be as a legal rule lah. Okay, the first must be reasonable. So it must have existed for a reasonable period. It must generally have been observed by the community, and then content must be certain and clear. So legal rules can be created by custom or they can be abrogated by disuse or the development of a custom that the contrary to the contrary. So legislation, however, can only be repealed by a body which passes legislation. Okay, the next will be the general principle. So actions such as theft, assault, recognized as most national legal system as crime tend to have the same meaning in an international context. So it is the general principle of law recognizing by civilized nation. Okay, this is general third source of international law. Is based on the theory of national law, which argues that the law are a reflections of the instinctual belief that some acts are right while other acts are wrong. For instance, most legal system value good faith. Macam itulah. Okay, the judicial in Article 38 1 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice. So JD, judicial decision is a subsidiary means for the determinations of rule of law. So other than customary law, so judge can always create new law. Many of its decisions introduce innovation into international law and won't gender general acceptance. So, for example, genocide cases, fisheries cases, or judgment on international court are also covered. For example, diplomatic impunity. Kalau macam you ada diplomatic immunity, so you bebas lah daripada jurisdiction. Okay, if I can just read it. Okay, this is the structure of the judicial decision. So law can be created through decision made by judge or superior court and subordinate court. So boleh tengok lah kan. Ni Mahkamah Malaysia, Federal Court, Court of Appeal. So we have High Court, we have Court Sabah, Sarawak, and the Session Court and Magistrate Court. So the last will be the upper will be the Superior Court. The lower will be the subordinate court. Okay, the effectiveness of international law. So international law is much difficult to enforce compared to national law. It depends on the power of the state, individually or collectively, to punish transgressors. So enforcement depends heavily on reciprocity. State follow international law in order other state to do so. So example World War II, the enforcement of non-use chemical weapon. Itu contohnya lah. And international law also recognize the legitimacy of reprisal in certain circumstances. Action that would mean illegal under international law are sometimes legal in responsible to legal action for other state. The state follow international law become more general of long-term costs that could come from disagreeing international law. So state can punish a state by collective responsibility. For example, imposition of economic sanction, in Libya. So itu antara satu peranan jugalah. Okay, international law. So weakness are reciprocity and collective response depends entirely on nation powers. So reciprocity was when a state has the power to implicit cause of the behavior, and then collective action work in the collective enough about the issue to respond. Okay, so that's all for the international law. And then we move to the other topic, which is the diplomacy. So what is diplomacy? So diplomacy is a management of international relations by negotiation. This is by the Oxford Dictionary. Okay, Sir Hannes Sato says that it is the applications of intelligence and tech to the conduct of official relation between government and of independent state. And then the next will be the represent the cumulative political, economic, and military precedent. Pressure upon each side formalized in the exchange of demand and concessions between negotiation. Ataupun kita panggil diplomat lah. Diplomasi ni yang dia melakukannya adalah diplomat. So diplomasi is basically a term that is wide and important of international relation between various nation. So diplomacy is the art of negotiation between various countries in international relation. It forms the basic for the peacekeeping, peacemaking, economy, culture, trade, war, and etc. What involves in terms of diplomacy? So it generally understood to be government communicating with governments. So it is a primary practice through embassies and consulates around the world, and involve foreign service officer and ambassador advancing their program, their governments, foreign policy objective while collecting and researching essential political and economic information. Okay, they have a lot of type of diplomacy. Okay, so following there is several type of diplomacy. So you can see it we have informal diplomacy. Okay, informal diplomacy means diplomasi yang tidak formal kan. Mungkin tengah-tengah makan, discussion kan. So para diplomasi culture, diplomasi economic. Gunboat diplomacy during the Cold War, you can just search it what is gunboat diplomacy. Ping pong diplomacy are between the US and China. You can just Google it also. So preventive diplomacy. So we want to prevent from using of force. Then we implement diplomacy. So we have public shuttle diplomacy and a lot lah. We also have panda diplomacy. Panda between Malaysia and China. So bila China bagi panda tu, dia dinamakan panda diplomasi lah. Okay, hubungan. Setiap hubungan tu dia mesti ada diplomatic or negotiation process. Okay, a diplomat is a person appointed by state to conduct diplomacy with other state or international organization. So the main function of diplomat revolve around the representation and protection of the interests and national of the standing state, as well as the promotions of information and friendly relation. Ni diplomat kita panggil kan, pegawai kedutaan atau C. So this is a diplomacy and foreign policy IDFR in Kuala Lumpur. So there is the training center for diplomats. Okay, the functions of diplomacy. So diplomacy is the most important use to complete a specific agenda. Therefore, without diplomacy, much of the world's affair would be abolished. International organization would not exist, and above all, the world would be at a constant state of war. So it is for diplomacy that certain countries can exist in harmony. Okay, so this is Henry Kissinger defining diplomacy. We can just says that diplomacy is a synonym for foreign policy or statecraft. So new and open diplomacy. Okay, now we look at the foreign policy. So also we're bound in the diplomacy. So foreign policy are strategy used by the government to guide their action in the international arena. So foreign policy spell out the objective state leader have decide to propose in a given relationship or situation, as well as the general mean by which they intend to pursue. So day to day, so decision made by various arms of government. So they are guided by the goal of implementation foreign policy. So foreign policy macam saya kata lah. So is a love letter, you know. So you can see lah our stand towards the other state. What is our stand? You can see within the foreign policy itself. Okay, so it is about how to make sense of all the phenomena that transcends national borders. For example, sending a diplomat note, inculcating a doctrine, you know, kita masukkan doctrine, making alliance, formulating long range relationship or short range relationship. Objectives such as making the world safe of democracy. Macam tu lah banyak lah. Okay. So state establish various organization structure, functional relationship to create and carry out foreign policy. So official and agencies collect information so about the situation through various channel. So they write memorandum outlining possible option for action, hold meeting. This is what we call foreign policy process. Okay. So foreign policy outcome result for multiple forces at various level of analysis. The outcome depend on individual decision maker, on the type of society and government they are work within, and on the international and global context of their action. So study of foreign policy emphasize mainly on the individual and also the basic level of analysis. So comparative of foreign policy is the study of foreign policy in various states in order to discover whether similar types of society or government constantly have similar types of foreign policy. For example, comparing across state or across different time periods for single state. So focus on size, wealth, and extent of democratic perception in government. So for example, so both capitalist and communist state have proven capable of naked aggression or peaceful behavior depending on their circumstances. So foreign policy ni depends on the state level lah ataupun behavior of the state itself. Okay, for example, Malaysia and Singapore. So although we are different, so anything can happen. Okay, anything can happen. So to avoid war, so we have to build relationship. So by using the foreign policy. So foreign policy process, the process of decision making. So state take action because people in governments decision make a choose action. So decision making is a steering process in which adjustments are made as a result of feedback from the outside world. So it's carried out by action taken to change the world, and then information from the world is monitored to evaluate the effect of action. Okay, this is the foreign policy decision making process. Okay, so individual and group psychological ni diplomats lah. Okay, they make decision making. So and then the implementation, and then they take progress action, and they take the effect the international and domestic politic. Then they monitor the situation, and then filtering lah. Okay, perception. So any under evaluation, then they filtering, and then they make decision. Okay. Okay, the formations of foreign policy. There has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, structure. The first is the strategic surrounding. So geostrategic tengoklah. Geostrategic, for example, in Southeast Asia, the foreign policy will be different, or maybe in Europe, the foreign policy structure will be different. Okay, and then we'll look at the political structure. So difference. Okay, for example, the democracy, they will look at the communism. So when they deal with communism, they have certain criteria that they allow, in terms of foreign policy. So demographic, so is so much more complex lah. For example, as Southeast Asian. So between Southeast Asian, they have different view. And then with other Europe also, they have different view. In terms of national security, historical factor, economic factor, it depends on the what issues ataupun what principle that wanted to brought out for the foreign policy itself. Okay. So instrument ni lah. Pertama adalah diplomatic bargaining. Okay, use instrument diplomat lah. Diplomatic bargaining, we bargain. For example, we want to have something within Singapore, so we bargain. Okay. So the second will be the propaganda lah. We portray our state were good, so it attracts the state to make a negotiation with us. The third will be economic reward and caution. This is by KJ Hosty. Okay, so we stop at Malaysian foreign policy, and then next we're going to continue on Malaysian foreign policy for the next video. Okay.